Hey guys, this video will mark the beginning of a longer series of videos containing tests I do on the various SCPs within CreepySins Foundation. In today's episode, I'm going to be showing you guys the first ever SCP I've tested on, SCP-914. Unfortunately, there will only be one SCP test in this video, so I apologize if it's short. Before I get to the test, I'm going to do a brief explanation of the SCP. If you'd like to skip this, I will be leaving timestamps in the description and they should appear on the red timeline thingy. Alright, so this is SCP-914. SCP-914 is a large, mechanical machine which seems to work by using a mechanism made out of multiple intricately connected cogs. The SCP is about 6.5 studs long and 33 wide. It presents two compartments, one on the right and one on the left. One compartment is used as the input and the other is used as the output. In the middle of the SCP, a switch can be observed, which serves the purpose of switching the setting of the SCP, which in turn changes the output of the SCP if something is inputted. There are 5 settings for the switch: rough, coarse, 1 by 1, fine, and very fine, each making the SCP work in different ways. So in my test, as you'll soon see, I set the middle switch to fine, which caused some pretty interesting results. I do admit that the test I did was a little wonky, however I was very nervous and it was my first test, so I think I deserve a little credit. Alright, so as you can see, I'm a trainee at the time of this test, and there is my supervisor. Without them, I couldn't host this test. Here, you can see me requesting one Class D as well as one combative in the testing radio, and there they are. I go ahead and tell the combative to brief, and whilst they're briefing, my supervisor mentions that I'm not wearing the correct uniform. So, no big deal. I reset while the combative is briefing, put on the correct uniform, and head back right on time. Although, there's another problem. Now that I've reset, the Class D bracelet is no longer on my screen, which means I have to re-request the Class D a second time. This bit is annoying because as you can see, I fail multiple times. Finally, I get the requesting format right and the Class D bracelet is on my screen, ready for action. Now, I'm having a bit of confusion here because in the bottom right you can see I've commenced my test. But that was before I had to reset. Now you can see that I've requested more Class D. So does this mean I have to recommence? At the time I had no idea, but I'm going to assume the answer is no, considering that the supervisor said nothing during the test. Anyways, now I can go ahead and escort the Class D to SCP-914's containment zone. Now, while this is happening, there are a few things that I forgot to mention. So I forgot to mention my test question as well as what class the SCP was. So the test question was, how long would it take for SCP-914 to transform a test subject on the fine setting? And my hypothesis for that was around 8 seconds. And the SCP class was safe. After we've arrived, I tell the Class D to sit down and I explain to him what is about to go down, which was pretty simple. I wanted him to go in, and when the input door is open, which is the one on the left, I wanted him to go in, then when he's in, I'm going to count how long it takes for him to transform. Then I ask him if he understands, and of course he says yes. Now we can get to the juicy part. So, me and the Class D go in, and I tell him to go inside, which seemed like a good idea up until I realized that I forgot to set the switch to fine. So, while he's inside, I crank the switch as fast as I can to the proper setting, and then I realized another thing, that I forgot to start the stopwatch. So, at this point, things got very hectic for me, but it all pretty much goes uphill from here. So, the Class D emerges from the output side, and he seems to be bent over in a very uncomfortable position. And then out of nowhere, what looks to be his soul says, "I'm Invis," followed by "Spooky Boy." So at this point, I'm very embarrassed because I failed to turn the switch before he went in and I failed to start the timer. So the test was pretty much void. Although, I remember that I recorded the whole thing. So I can go back in time to rewatch the footage and count how long it takes for him to transform, which according to my stopwatch was around 11 to 12 seconds. And if you don't believe me, you can rewind the video and count it for yourself. Now, I'm finished with the test and I have my results. So, I go ahead and give the Class D 15 reputation points for his cooperation, terminate him via the bracelet, and conclude the test. Now, I can go ahead and log the test, and once the test is successfully recorded by a chief researcher or higher, I can go ahead and request a promotion, so that I can host more tests on safe class SCPs without the need for a supervisor. And that's about it. A mostly successful test on SCP-914. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. I apologize if it's a little short. Unfortunately, I'm not a junior researcher yet, so I'm unable to host any tests by myself. I could request for a supervisor, but I don't really feel like bothering one right now, and I'd much prefer to just wait until I get promoted. Anyways, thank you guys for watching. My next episode will most likely be on SCP-999, SCP-316, or SCP-093. Again, thanks for watching, and I will see you guys in the next episode.